On the edge of Blackwater Marsh stood a weather-beaten lighthouse known as Harrow's Reach. It hadn't guided ships for nearly 50 years, yet every few nights, villagers swore they saw its lantern flicker to life, a pale green glow sweeping silently across the marsh. They said the lantern keeper still walked there, long after death. For Mara Ellison, a young journalist chasing her first real story, the legends were irresistible. She arrived at the marsh just after sundown, her boots sinking into the damp earth as fog curled around her ankles. The lighthouse loomed ahead, tall and skeletal, its stones cracked and darkened by salt and time. Inside, the spiral staircase groaned under her weight. Every step echoed like footsteps not entirely her own. By the time Mara reached the lantern room, the sun had vanished completely. She set up her camera, ready to debunk the ghost stories. That's when the wind died, and the lighthouse breathed. The glass panes rattled, trembling with a cold that had nothing to do with the sea. Mara steadied her camera. "If someone's here," she said, barely above a whisper, "show yourself." The lantern ignited. A sickly gleam burst to life inside the iron cage, swirling like mist trapped in glass. Mara stumbled back, her heart pounding. Then she saw him. A figure stood at the far corner of the room, tall, gaunt, soaked in brine. His skin looked like waterlogged paper stretched too thin, and his eyes burned with the same green light as the lantern. Mara forced herself to speak. "Keeper, aren't you?" He raised a skeletal hand and touched the lantern. The flame expanded, casting the room into a storm of shadows. The sound of waves filled Mara's ears, though they were miles from any shore. Images flashed in the glass. A storm. A ship. A captain begging for light. A frantic keeper racing to the tower, only to slip on the wet steps. The lantern going dark at the worst possible moment. The ship shattering against the rocks. The keeper sinking beneath the waves. Lantern still in hand, the guilt dragging him deeper than the ocean ever could. The visions disappeared. The keeper stood before Mara now, impossibly close, the smell of salt and rot clinging to him. "You're trapped," she whispered, his head bowed. "You want the lantern lit again, don't you, to finish your watch?" The keeper looked up, and for the first time Mara felt his longing, a desperate need to guide a wayward ship that had already sunk half a century ago. Slowly, she placed her hand on the lantern. "Then let me help." The green flame surged, roaring like a living thing. Light burst through the windows, reaching far across the marsh, cutting through the fog like a blade. Mara felt the keeper's presence beside her, then behind her, then fading, drifting away on an unseen tide. When the light finally dimmed, she turned. The lantern keeper was gone. Only a single footprint remained, wet, glistening on the stone floor, slowly evaporating as though it had never existed. And yet, out on Blackwater Marsh, the fog had cleared completely, revealing a straight, shining path of moonlit water stretching all the way to the horizon, as if the keeper, at long last, had found his way home. The Lantern Keeper Part 2. The One Who Answers. Mara Ellison returned to Blackwater Marsh 3 days after the lantern first lit. She told herself it was for follow-up interviews, additional research, a chance to document whatever natural phenomenon caused the green flame. But in truth, she wanted to know why she couldn't stop dreaming about the sea. Every night since, she'd woken gasping, her lungs full of imagined salt water, her hands reaching for a lantern she didn't own, and always in the dream's final moment she heard a whisper. He answered, "Now you must." The marsh was colder the second time. The fog clung tighter, heavier as though waiting. Harrow's Reach loomed ahead, the lighthouse dark and silent, but Mara knew better now. Silence meant nothing. The footsteps that weren't hers inside, the air was damp and metallic. She climbed slowly, each step creaking in protest. Halfway up, she paused. The stairs beneath her were vibrating, as though someone else was climbing too, just a heartbeat out of sync. She turned sharply. No one. And yet the sound continued, breathing with her, following her. She forced herself upward, gripping her camera like a weapon. When she reached the lantern room, she exhaled shakily. Everything looked exactly as she'd left it, except the lantern was missing. Its space on the pedestal was empty, the dust disturbed in a perfect circle. Mara's pulse quickened. "Not possible," she whispered. "I didn't take it." A low sound answered her, not a voice, not quite a groan, more like the sound of the sea straining through a closed door. Then the lighthouse shuddered. A wave of cold air burst through the room, slamming the shutters open. Fog spilled inside like living smoke, twisting, rising, forming a shape. A woman, water streaming from her hair, clothes torn, eyes hollow. Not the keeper, someone else. The ghost hovered inches from Mara, raising a trembling, translucent hand as if begging to be heard. "You're from the ship," Mara choked out. The ghost's head jerked violently, as though nodding cost her pain. She opened her mouth, and a torrent of seawater poured out, splashing across the floor. Mara stumbled backward. The ghost reached for her throat, not to choke, but to pull. Not toward the stairs, not toward the door, but toward the window overlooking the black water. Across the marsh, a faint light flickered. Green, swaying, moving. Someone or something was carrying the lantern. The ghost let out a drowning, gargled whisper, "He's not done," and vanished. The lantern walks. Mara ran down the staircase, nearly slipping on the damp steps. At the bottom, she burst outside into the freezing fog. There, across the marsh, a glowing green shape moved slowly, as though sweeping the ground with light. She followed. Her boots sank deep into the wet soil. Reeds scraped her legs. Every few steps she looked up to make sure the lantern was still there. It was, but she wasn't getting closer. If anything, the lantern was leading her. After nearly 20 minutes, the ground changed beneath her feet, softer, colder, and without warning, she sank up to her knees. A sinkhole. Panic surged. She tried to climb out, but the mud was sucking her downward inch by inch. The lantern's glow drew nearer, and then she saw the figure holding it. The keeper, but wrong. His form twitched unnaturally as though strings pulled him from every direction. His head was tilted too far to one side, his lantern held in a stiff, broken angle. The flame inside pulsed violently, blowing in a wind that didn't exist. "Mara," the voice was distorted, warped by water. Her blood ran cold. He knew her name. "You lit the way," he rasped. "But now, you must hold it." "What are you talking about?" She struggled harder against the marsh. "The light must never die," the keeper whispered, "or others will come." The mud rose past her hips. "Help me," she shouted. He stepped closer, the lantern casting green light across his rotting features. "I am helping," he whispered. Then he leaned forward and placed the lantern directly into her sinking hands. The flame blazed. The mud closed over her legs, and the keeper began to fade. "No!" she screamed. "Don't leave me." The last thing she heard before the marsh swallowed the sound was his whisper. "The lantern chooses its keeper." The Lantern Keeper, Part 3. The Drowning Light. Mara Ellison sank deeper into the marsh, the cold mud gripping her legs like the fingers of the dead. The lantern, the keeper's lantern, burned in her hands with a frantic, pulsing green flame. The keeper himself was gone, but the whisper of his last words still clung to the fog. The lantern chooses its keeper. The marsh that watches, the sinking slowed, not stopped, but slowed, as if the marsh were waiting to see what she would do. Mara raised the lantern higher. The green light washed over the fog, and a shape began to form beneath the waterlogged ground, a shipwreck buried beneath the mud, a jagged hull, skeletal masts half rotted away. Then, dozens of pale faces surfaced just beneath the murk. Men, women, children. The drowned passengers of the lost ship, their eyes glowed faintly with the same ghostly light, and all of them were looking at her. Mara's breath hitched. They weren't hostile. They were waiting for the light. The lantern flared brighter in her shaking hands, and then she understood. The lantern wasn't a beacon. It was a ferry, a guide, a final release for those who had never reached shore. All they needed was someone to hold it, someone alive, someone who could go where the keeper could not. The choice. The choice, a voice rose from the marsh, dozens of voices layered into one. "Will you carry us home?" Mara's heart pounded. "No," she gasped. "I can't. I'm not." Her mind flashed through every article she'd ever written, every failure, every fear, every moment she'd believed she wasn't enough. But then she thought of the keeper. He had tried to save them, even in death, until the burden broke him, and the lantern chose her. The mud tightened around her ribs. There was no going back, not without damning these souls forever. Mara lifted the lantern, and the flame surged, spilling green light across the marsh like a rising tide. "I'll carry you," she whispered. "Show me the way." The crossing. The ground beneath her solidified, just enough for her to stand. The drowned passengers rose slowly, their forms lifting from the earth like reflections peeled from dark water. They drifted behind her in a silent procession. With each step she took across the marsh, the lantern's glow parted the fog. creating a shimmering path of moonlit water stretching toward the distant horizon. The ghosts followed, and for the first time in decades, they walked above the water, not beneath it. Halfway across the path, Mara felt the lantern lighten, as though the weight of grief was lifting from it. The ghosts began to dissolve into mist, one by one, their faces softening into peace as they vanished into the widening glow ahead. The last to fade was the woman from the lighthouse, the one who had drowned. She paused, touched Mara's shoulder with a cold, gentle hand, and mouthed, "Thank you." Then she drifted into the light and was gone. The return. The lantern dimmed, the path collapsed behind her, swallowed by the marsh. The fog closed in once more. Mara stood alone again, exhausted, shaking, mud-stained, but alive. And the lantern was now empty. Its flame had died, its purpose finally fulfilled. She walked back to the lighthouse on trembling legs. At the threshold, she felt a shift in the air, the faint scent of salt and old storms, a presence. The keeper appeared before her one last time, not twisted, not tormented, but whole. His eyes no longer glowed, but were clear, human, gentle. "You did what I could not," he said softly. "You showed them the way home." Mara exhaled a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. "What happens now?" He smiled, a small, weary, grateful smile. "Now, the lighthouse rests." He placed a hand over hers on the lantern. Light, soft, silver, peaceful, spread across his form until he dissolved into a drifting shimmer. A final whisper touched the air. "Thank you, Keeper." And then he was gone. Epilogue. One last light. Months later, locals swear that Harrow's Reach remains quiet. No strange lights, no footsteps, no whispers. And yet, on the anniversary of the wreck, a single green flame flickers in the lantern room. Just for a moment. As if saying, some stories never vanish, they simply find the right hands to carry them.